You're happy. So with that, I want to introduce you to the next. It's a keynote speaker and a case study from Trimble. Trimble has been a repeat sponsor of TiEcon, so I want to thank Trimble and Chris for that. And Chris Stern, our next speaker, he leads strategy and development for smart water IoT at Trimble. So when I say smart water, it's not that water you buy in the bottle, but basically managing the distribution and all the other aspects of water, making that a smart water ecosystem. So with that, I invite Chris to the stage, and if you could just play a quick video of Trimble.
We didn't start as a worldwide enterprise, but we knew we had the potential to become one. We had a feeling growth would change us for the better, and it did. In this growth, we united. We are a group of incredibly skilled people who together are powerful. A force to be reckoned with, something with sticking power. One Trimble. As a group, we strive to be everything we know we can be. We are driven, constantly pushing ourselves to work harder and smarter. We are collaborative because we understand that the best ideas come from anywhere. We are pioneering, pushing the limits and producing groundbreaking solutions. And we are culture-centric, which means we are genuine. We put our partners and customers first and work alongside them to deliver the best solutions, the ones that work. Together, we are transforming the way the world works. But it doesn't stop here. We will continue to innovate with our feet on the ground and our eyes on the horizon. We must continue to do the right thing, commit to doing it better each time, and keep on doing it. To move at the speed of light and to move even faster than that. We are growing, changing, and becoming stronger. We are Trimble. We are one.
All right. Hopefully everyone's super inspired from that marketing video. I want to thank Prakash for inviting me here. I've worked with Prakash a long time. My name's Chris Stern, and as he mentioned, I've handled a number of different things since coming on, but I'm also a recovering entrepreneur now working in the corporate world. I sold my company Trimble in 2006. So what I wanted to do today was hopefully give you all a background of probably one of the early pioneers in what was the Internet of Things before it was called the Internet of Things, and that's a little bit about Trimble. And part of that, what I wanted to do is give you a little bit of story about how that works from an entrepreneur standpoint in terms of innovating, developing a real business in key markets. The case study I have is on the Trimble-focused area in the water sector. So, part of this is also to give you an indication of how we targeted the water, why we think that's interesting as one of the many verticals that we focus on, how we approached it, how we created the technologies and solutions, and how we're doing in that particular area. Hopefully that can inspire some ideas. So really the order of the presentation is around that sequence is first off just a little bit about my story, a little bit about the company. You had a lot about the marketing story of the company, but I want to give you a little bit of a kind of a technology evolution story, and then talk about this area that I think some of the presenters touched on, but generally speaking, smart cities has been a big movement around the world, depending on where you're at. And smart cities indicates a variety of interesting areas, one of which is water, so I'll focus on that. what that means and what some of the solutions are that we're offering, and give you some real-world examples of the benefits and how this is actually being deployed. It's not as glamorous in the field deploying a lot of this in some of these industrial Internet of Things areas. So the technology, the value is tremendous, but I wanted to give you some practical, real-world views of what that looks like from a deployment standpoint. So on my side, this is me, and Prakash gave a little introduction, but sort of the bottom piece there is a little bit of a trajectory. I actually started off as an engineer and then moved throughout my career just straight into technology and ended up focusing on a utility side. Utilities, I worked for the largest utility in the US, municipally owned, which was Los Angeles, and came up with a lot of ideas for field technologies and mobility when I realized they didn't have technology like that when I was there. And so that's what spawned me off into my first startup. And did a variety of other ones in the areas of mobility, and one of which that is there was the one that I sold to Trimble in 2006. So Prakash and I joined Trimble about the same time, and from 2006 on, other than other endeavors, advisory roles and board members and that type of thing, I really switched. I jumped sides. So on the startup side, you're trying to raise money, you're trying to build a business, you're trying to do those things. But the capital side now was available, and so the interesting part for me was then being on the other side. Trimble does not have a venture fund. We acquire companies primarily in target markets for technology, and we've done over 100 acquisitions. Like I said, I was one, over 100 in the last 10 years. I don't have the laundry list there, but that's essentially my journey, and I had to put up a little headline there that came out the day, of course, of the acquisition that indicated that it made such an impact on Trimble's stock price. So who's Trimble? You got the marketing side, but really Trimble's been around for over 30 years. Trimble started as one of the early pioneers in GPS, GNSS, so Stanford Department of Defense, the satellite systems in terms of positioning and locating. And you think of the early days of IoT, if you want to call it IoT, but you have a lot of things moving around on the ground that have to communicate with satellites for position information, position and timing. So Trimble started off in this space in terms of looking at a lot of machines and instruments moving around the world. The business today is a $2.4 billion public company based right here out of Sunnyvale. And what we have is 4 major areas that are close to $15 billion in terms of market focus, and they're very focused on specific things. The geospatial area is satellite-based positioning, measurement, the core business of what Trimble started in. And then we moved into applying a lot of that technology in these large markets like construction. So Trimble has a partnership with Caterpillar, a global partnership. If you see technology on Caterpillar construction machines, if you drive around and you look, you'll see Trimble receivers guiding the machine. We did the same thing in agriculture, took machine control and guidance into agriculture, and then naturally into transportation and logistics. A lot of those businesses weren't around when Trimble started and have grown through acquisitions and new innovations and taking technology from one space and applying it to another. I'm going to focus on what we call the emerging businesses. So in Trimble, we find areas that we see as adjacencies or interesting markets, and once we understand the opportunity is large enough to create a business of the size of these above, which are generally 200 million revenue or higher, we put a business area together and we start focusing on building that. So I'm going to talk about the water space and why that's interesting from an IoT perspective to the company. So Trimble's path to getting into industry solutions is much like a lot of the discussions here on IoT, is horizontal technology on the bottom left, GPS, that was used for all sorts of measurement. And then Trimble was about a $200 million company and bought another $200 million and merged. So Spectra and Trimble became one. Spectra was doing, what do you call it, optical sort of measurement, and Trimble was doing positioning, and you need both to measure points. They came together and moved into positioning. From positioning, moved into field productivity, like I said, from Caterpillar, putting the technology onto machines and guidance. And then now the whole business is focused on looking at these vertical markets, and there's a picture of all those. And what we look to do is apply the core technologies of the company, which are these positioning and sensor technologies, with the modeling, data analysis, and analytics, and deliver end vertical market, complete workflow solutions. We've seen the cliche slide of why we're interested in the Internet of Things. We all have the numbers of why that's interesting. The number of devices are booming out there, and we see it every day. We have our instruments in over 150 countries measuring things. We have our machine control all over the world. And what you have is you have a lot of information in a lot of very different locations and a lot of challenges to get that information back to make decisions. The interesting part of this presentation, the focus on smart cities and water, if you look at the value, don't look at the number of devices, you say, well, how can this help, right? And one of the main questions is, as an entrepreneur or startup is there really a problem there that has a big enough value to spend any time solving? And we look at this, and you look at water, and you look at government, you see the spending and the value at 1.9 trillion overall and over 200 million in government and utilities. And the water piece here is a big component of that, and I'll explain that. So when you look at water, why do we care about water? I think everyone in this room has been touched by a water issue in the last few years, especially here in California with the drought, right? We've had the drought. I had violations at my home. I was penalized for watering on the wrong day. And if you've ever watched, you should YouTube Jimmy Kimmel's episode of driving around with one of the utilities. They call it Law and Water, like a law and tackling people for watering their lawns. It's hilarious. And the problem is real, though. There's 3.9 billion people that will be in water-stressed areas. And everything to do with the climate, weather change is more extreme, more severe weather events. We see that all over the world. The flooding in India. We've had issues with New Orleans that preceded a lot of this stuff. So there's real challenges there that have huge financial implications. And the other big thing here is that applying IoT, we're looking at infrastructure that's buried, and you can bury problems, and they've been buried for 100 years plus, is the pipes that are in the ground. And if you ever looked at a pipe that they've taken out of the ground, you'll question why you actually drink water out of your tap. Now, the regulations are higher for drinking water than they are for bottled water, which is interesting. But infrastructure is failing, and that's $1 trillion construction spend coming around. This is the US number. Around the world, it's a massive spend. And then the implications of having bad infrastructure, if you look at Flint, Michigan, and you were watching any of the news, they had water coming out of the tap that the EPA classified not as above the level, they classified it as hazardous waste coming out of the tap in homes in Flint, Michigan. With that resulted in $700 million class action lawsuits and criminal investigations, criminal charges against public officials. So it's a big problem. The other thing is the study, every year they come out with an infrastructure scorecard. And with the importance of water, the funny part is it's getting a grade of a D. D and a D plus on the wastewater side from the American Society of Civil Engineers. So such an important issue, and it's failing. Everyone's failing at this issue. So we saw this as an opportunity. It's going to drive investment, and there's going to be technology applied. Now, from a market perspective and from an investment perspective, there's reports like this from CB. If you look at the ecosystem of smart cities and smart water, what you see is water actually sits right there. Trimble is positioned in this. We would not have been in this map about 3 to 4 years ago. And so since we formed our water business, we have made, I'll talk about one of the acquisitions we've made, but we are now sitting squarely as one of the providers of the technology of the future to help the water industry and cities meet these challenges. Now, the other big thing on this I thought was interesting too is another report, study. It said all the cities, it asked the question, what are the most important smart cities issues that you need to tackle? 20 in the 2 different years, those are 2 different years in the color codes. But even here you see water as one of the top 3 issues and actually exceeds in terms of the scores it received from the public officials in importance. And now when you blow this out from an IoT perspective, you say, okay, water IoT, what does that mean? Well, this is what it means. There's 5 layers in terms of the challenge. There's the physical layer, the pipes, the physical infrastructure that you see. And the question that's being asked is, how do we apply technology to all that aging physical infrastructure to help solve problems with leaks, breaks, 14 billion in water loss around the world every year. How do we solve that? And so you solve it with IoT technologies to understand what's actually going on, and we call that eliminating the blind spots. Companies like GE, companies like Schneider, they live in industrial automation in large treatment plants, large facilities. But water systems are distributed across large cities, and you don't actually have access to information once it leaves those plants. In fact, the majority of you don't even have a smart meter at your home. You may have an electric smart meter, but you don't have a water smart meter. So no one knows what's going on when that water leaves the plant. A lot of manual processes. So this ecosystem in this chart is another blowout by an industry-specific analyst looking at the companies that are trying to solve that problem. And again, Trimble, we're positioned right in there in terms of connecting the physical infrastructure, bringing sensing and control, collecting the information, transmitting it over systems, and then using data and analytics to actually solve real problems and answer real questions and not just provide a set of information that someone needs to act upon. The reason we don't want to provide information is this last chart on this very busy slide. The piece of this that, and I was just at a CIO summit in Washington, D.C. with a lot of the utilities across the U.S., and the number one issue really is resources. So if you look at water, and I always say this is a really funny thing, if your job as an entrepreneur and you make a product, your number one job out there is to go sell that product. You're the brand product ambassador. What was being asked of the water industry is saying, hey, people are using too much water, we need conservation. Your number one job is to convince people to buy less of your product. So think about that. Think about that. That's the water manager's challenge. They don't have any resources. When you sell less of your product, you actually make less money. So revenue is a challenge and resources are a challenge. They said that's our biggest issue in terms of deploying these technologies. So they need full service solutions. They don't have staff that can figure it out. So from a, click here, or maybe you can help me with the next slide there. So from a Trimble perspective, we formed a water business. We are a dedicated business unit within the company. And what we did in 2015 is we acquired the company that's listed up there in the top right corner. And that's Telog, and they were actually not a sexy Internet of Things. They were around for 25 years, but they had been making sensors, battery-powered, rugged telemetry that sat on top of water and wastewater systems, collected and processed information. They didn't do much with the data, they gave it to the utility. We acquired Telog and immediately became the leading provider in North America. We have over 4,000, actually up to 4,000, just under 4,000 utilities in North America and around the world. They actually have some sales around the world. So what we're looking to do is take that technology out of Trimble's in the bottom picture in the middle where we sit in the construction space and sort of grow our business in solving problems in what we call the complete infrastructure lifecycle. So from planning, design, construction, all the way through daily operations and maintenance and help people manage all this physical infrastructure that's in the ground. So how we're doing that is we're taking IoT technology, we're taking sensors. We actually have engineers, we build our own rugged hardware, we build our own software, and now we're processing that with analytics to solve very specific issues. And like I said before, if you look at an industry, you have to really know if there's valuable challenges that you can solve to deliver value. What's the ROI? Why should I spend money on this? And we've picked a handful of areas where there's real large ROI to solving these problems. So what does that look like from a solution standpoint? And this is the picture. So we say we have a smart water IoT portfolio of solutions. And I'll take you through this left to right. So fundamentally, Trimble's been helping organizations around the world map, create digital models. We say connecting the physical to the digital. And so you can't really manage things you don't know exist. So the first challenge, and Trimble does on the left, is help them identify, build a 3D digital model of physical assets. From there, once you know what you have, we have workflows and tools from a mobility standpoint to help them manage the maintenance and the work that occurs on those physical assets. Then we moved into IoT. So IoT was actually the third piece of this. So the mode of operation was, what do we have? How do we manage it reactively, right? It breaks, someone calls in, my water doesn't taste good. So now we have a chance to move to proactive management, and IoT provides that. So the acquisition we made provides a suite of solutions for moving to more proactive mode of management on the water issues. And then with that, the analytics and the software can provide a complete tool for water organizations, whether it be state, local, government, private, ag, irrigation, to have an event and water management platform there to manage their entire business. The way that looks from an architecture standpoint, I thought this would be a good slide just to show you the pieces of the puzzle, right? So the one big piece that we have and we are in business to do is make and manufacture and test. You can call them sensors. Some people would have called them in the past RTUs or remote telemetry units. But essentially these are rugged, battery-powered, wireless devices that can collect information on water and wastewater parameters like taste, odor, chlorine, pressure, flow, all of the things that you need to know to manage water. And they get deployed in very dirty, wet environments. Unlike electric power, which has power to power these sensors, the biggest challenge is you don't have power in the majority of these locations. So battery life becomes a big management challenge. So once we have those deployed, then we connect those. And this is an interesting space as well. That used to be just purely radio. It's moved to cellular, so all of our products work on cellular. However, there's a large movement into what they call the LPWAN, the low power wide area networks. And I'll talk a little bit about that in terms of supporting things that get very long range, very low cost. The other piece here is the data management. So all the information comes back into our platform, which is a hosted service, and then it's the presentation layer is what we call Trimble Unity, which is a cloud service and an app you download, like most, from your phone, Android, iPad. But we also work on a variety of Trimble units that are already in use in a lot of these organizations. So the problems we solve are on the top, on the water side, is actually we can go what we say is from source to tap, to your home, to your meter. And that's the blind spot. And we have capabilities to deploy for rain, for reservoirs, for groundwater, for pump stations, for wells. And also you see the one that's really popular is you just screw it onto a fire hydrant. On the wastewater side, it's actually a bigger issue. Wastewater in the majority of the world is regulated to a higher level than water because of the environmental implications of a spill. So you have contaminated water, stormwater, and wastewater, and so the majority of our business actually measuring under those covers in the street, the manhole covers, is water level. In New York, we have probably 500 units underground that are measuring and transmitting the level, the flow, and indicating and alerting on alarms if there's anything that goes wrong. So the evolution is actually interesting. This stuff started, Trimble's been, like I said, doing a lot of this, and we have the history now of having tried to solve these problems with older technologies, with solar panels connected out to big boxes. And then we moved into this newer area that we're generally in right now, which is the cellular phase. And then going to the new area, the LPWAN and LoRa technology, things like Sigfox, Verizon, AT&T, and others, the narrowband IoT, where you're looking at new technologies like this. We introduced this last year in a big water conference. In partnership, this technology works. The network is LoRa. LoRa Alliance is actually an organization that works, and they deploy LoRa networks, and they're deployed in various parts of the world. Senate is one of the partners, but Comcast, up in the right corner, that machine queue, there was a major announcement. Even Comcast, large cable provider, media company, they have committed to launch a business for wireless IoT network services in a variety of places. They picked 5 cities, and they're rolling that out. So we launched a new line. We were the first to launch a line of our products that work over these narrowband. And the interesting part about this is to conserve battery life on cellular, you only transmit when there's an alert or alarm. Otherwise, you're doing it once a day. You're reading throughout the day, but you're not activating a modem. But with narrowband or with LoRa, you actually can send, and you do send every 15 minutes, and you get the same battery life. So you get more of a real-time view of what's actually occurring in the field. So that all comes together. Like I said, that all pieces together in our platform, like I said, is the Trimble Unity, and that's showing some pictures of how that pulls together and gives you visualization from a large map perspective, and the analytics and the workflows to actually resolve issues on the mobile devices when there is a problem in the field. What it looks like I said in the beginning, was it's not so glamorous. You know, IoT in some of these industrial areas is not so glamorous when you actually have to deploy it. This is a picture in Los Angeles where it was deployed, and you can see some of the recorders and what they're doing. They're actually going under lid covers on valves in the street. They're screwing attachments onto fire hydrants. And then after that, you see our little Trimble device that's actually reading the information that they found. The screen shows a bunch of leaks that we found. All of a sudden, we knew where leaks and pressure issues were. They'd never had a clue what was going on. We found all that, and then you know generally on the map, and then you take our little handheld, and it actually takes you to it. So it knows generally where it is, but then the handheld, what's showing there is they walked right up to it, and there, lo and behold, there's a leak that's been going on forever in a meter box. So these are the things that are buried underground that no one had visibility to, that around the world you have generally 40% of the water is what they call non-revenue, lost water, lost to leakage. So these are the types of challenges and benefits that we have when there's just not enough water around to serve everyone. And last, just kind of wrapping up here, I'm about right on time, I have one more after this, is just the benefits. Like I said, if you're doing a project like this, in Trimble we spend a lot of time identifying a market, identifying the benefits, that there's a problem that actually has real substantial value and benefits. And so in the case of deployment, what I want to do is give you 3 examples. One is an agency in Virginia. We're the largest water wastewater, especially on the wastewater side in the US. And they deployed all of our, what we call our TEL-log manhole level monitors and regulatory reporting system for them, and they targeted a 1.4 and identified the savings at 1.4 million annually. LA, for the leakage story I gave you in pressure, they have started their business case and they're already at 6 million annually. And then the last one is an interesting one because we also make all the little handhelds. If you watch people read your water meter, they're using probably Trimble technology to do that. We partner and we work with all the leading manufacturers. And so they called us Sacramento and said, can you deploy your software and help us deploy smart meters throughout the city? And using our software, our workflows and technology, they'd identified the savings, same thing, large savings in terms of deployment and rapid pace. So I'll leave you with a couple thoughts on this because I see we're out of time. And really what I wanted to do is kind of give you some takeaways, and it's a lot of information, but the takeaways that I wanted to leave you with is that from an industrial internet perspective and from Trimble's perspective, the industrial Internet of Things and these vertical markets have massive opportunities. The challenge is actually finding the benefit, finding an industry that's ready to address real problems that have real benefits. And then when you actually go and try and do it, you have to realize, I've been going to the conferences on wireless. You know, I called it sort of the wild, wild west of the early days of wireless IoT comms. And that's just one piece of the puzzle. There are many layers and there are many technologies to bring together to solve these problems. So if you're going to be successful, it's really important to understand the opportunity, not just from a market, but also what is the value it delivers to those customers? What are the benefits you bring? And then you have to move quickly because all this stuff is moving quickly and it's changing very fast and you have to be ready to do that. And that's why I think a lot of the entrepreneurs who've done this before, you're equipped for that. And that's really the net summary. So with that, I will wrap up and say thank you for listening to our story. Appreciate it.